The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 11th webinar on the secret teachings of all ages by Manly P. Hall. This and all subsequent webinars will be available on makara.us under Webinar Series in Progress at the top of the listings. Some of you have asked for homework for a guideline on the best way to study between sessions. I try to present these webinars in such a way that no study is required in order to understand what's going on. But if you'd like to study in advance, there are two levels of approach. First, simply read ahead a couple of pages in Secret Teachings, which is like 5 pages in a normal sized book. There's a link in the chat box, or there will be shortly, for an excellent online version of the book, which we use during these webinars. If you choose to read in advance, page numbers are shown at the bottom of each page of text, so you'll know on what page we finish the webinars. If you want to go deeper yet, there's always great source material you can check out, like the Nag Hammadi library, which we put in the chat box last month and are putting in again this month.
Yeah, it's in there right now.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Biel. So within this text is the Gospel of Thomas, an especially interesting and accessible read. Beyond this, you can note the sources we use in the webinar. Always, I try to put in the book name and the page number at the bottom of the readings. And so if something really appeals to you, just grab it. If I find them, if I can find them online, you can too. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit, but very often it's quite accessible. Okay, let's start with a quick review. Last month, we finished MPH's section on the Christ-like Mithra and Mithraism, with its focus on both the lion and the bull, Leo and Taurus, and then moved into the even deeper waters of Gnosticism, which students of the subject have come to know so much more about as a result of the discovery of 13 codices in Nag Hammadi, Egypt in 1945. So that discovery took place after the Secret Teachings was written. Until this discovery, the most important source of Gnosticism was the Pistis Sophia, an extraordinary allegory about Sophia, Christ's syzygy or dual, which is, among other things, a metaphor for personality redemption by the soul. It's generally agreed that the founder of Gnosticism was Simon Magus, or Magus, which the church vilified in an attempt to stamp out Gnostic influence, but whose surviving quotes prove him to be an inspired teacher. Though Christ stands at the center of Gnosticism, philosophically, the Gnostics were more influenced by the Greek philosophy than by what came to be known as Christianity. Let's take a look at J.A. Knapp painting entitled Abraxas, which was the Gnostic creator god. So if we could get a reader for this section here, let me show you. See that very light text at the bottom on the left there? Even on the huge edition, you need a magnifying glass to read that. And so this is that text. So if we could get a reader, please.
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The name Abrax, coined by Basilides, the Egyptian Gnostic, is a word symbol consisting of 7 letters, which signify the 7 creative powers or planetary angels recognized by the ancients. Samson Alden McKay advances the theory that the name is compounded from 2 ancient words, Abir, which means a bull, and Axis, which means the pole.
To substantiate
his belief, he brings forward the fact that the motion of the Earth, commonly called the alteration of the poles, resulted in the vernal equinox taking place at one time in Taurus, the celestial bull, over the North Pole. The 4 white horses drawing the chariot of Abrax symbolize the 4 ethers, by means of which the solar power, Abrax, is circulated through all parts of the universe. The 7-lettered name of Abrax is symbolically significant of the 7-rayed power. That the modern world has any knowledge whatever of ancient Gnostic symbolism is largely due to the cupidity of those individuals. Cupidity, is that right?
Yes, cupidity.
Cupidity of those individuals who set themselves the task of destroying every intelligible record of Gnostic philosophy. For wishing to keep rather than destroy articles of commercial value, these fanatics preserved gems upon which Gnostic symbols were engraved. The above plate is the enlargement and amplification of a Gnostic jewel, the original stone being on a trifle over an inch in height. Rings and other articles of jewelry set with Gnostic gems were undoubtedly used by members of the cult as means of identification. As the order was a secret society, the designs were small and inconspicuous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any thoughts or questions about this very interesting read, actually? Here's one of many possible stones that J.A. Knapp may have used to inspire his painting. There's many of these type, actually hundreds of stones depicting Abraxas. Okay, first, the name Abraxas, coined by Basilides or Basilides, the Egyptian Gnostic, is a word symbol consisting of 7 letters which signify the 7 creative powers or planetary angels recognized by the ancients. For deeper insight on the 7-in-1, which we've also been studying in the Secret Doctrine webinars, let's take a look at a few quotes from the Secret Doctrine. Could we get a reader for this?
Michael, can you read that, please?
Okay. Just as the IAO of the mysteries was distinct from Jehovah, so was the latter Io and Abraxas of some Gnostic sects identical with the God of the Hebrews, who was the same with the Egyptian Horus. This is undeniably proven on heathen as on the Gnostic Christian gems. In Matter's collection of such gems, there is a Horus seated on the lotus, inscribed Abraxialia. An address exactly parallel to the so frequent Ace Zetz Sarape on the contemporary heathen gems, and therefore only to be translated by Abraxas is the one Jehovah. But who was Abraxas? As the same author shows, the numerical or Kabbalistic value of the name Abraxas directly referred to the Persian title of the god Mithra, ruler of the year, worshipped from the earliest times under the appellation of Io. Thus the sun in one aspect, the moon or the lunar genius in another, that generative deity whom the Gnostics saluted as "Thou that presideth over the mysteries of the Father and the Son, who shinest in the night time, holding the second rank, the first Lord of death." Agathodaimon, the Gnostic savior, and even Abraxas is no longer the glyph for abstract creative power, but symbolizes the 4 atoms or races, the 5th being represented by the 5 branches cut off from the tree of life, on which the old band stands in the Gnostic gems. The number of the root races was recorded in the ancient Greek temples by the 7 vowels, of which 5 were framed in a panel in the initiation halls of the Adaita. Ein Sof also is said to manifest through the 7 letters of Jehovah's name, who, having usurped the place of the unknown limitless, was given by his devotees his 7 angels of the presence, his 7 principles. Valentinus expatiates upon the power of the great 7, who were called to bring forth this universe after our Ratos, or the ineffable, whose name is composed of 7 letters, had represented the first hebdomad. This name, Aratos, is one to indicate the 7-fold nature of the One, the Logos. The goddess Rhea, says Proclus in Timaeus, is a monad, duad, and heptad, comprehending in herself all the Titanidae, who are 7.
Gee, Michael, I'm surprised you don't use the word Titanidae in your daily speech.
I will in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. No, well, this is quite a load. This is just a sampling, really, of the references in the Secret Doctrine to both Abraxas and the idea of 7 letters or 7 vowels, and they're often, as you can see, come together. So there's a few ideas that we can draw from this. First of all, does anybody have any thoughts or questions about anything here?
Are you going to touch on the numerological significance of each of the 7 letters?
Of Abraxas? No,
Yes.
because there's no information that I could find on them. But I will point out one thing about this. Let's see, you can find it, see up here, this Abraxaxia, but just the Abraxas by itself, where is it? Anyway, notice that it's punctuated again with A's. A, BR, which stands as one sound. A again, X, A, S. So, yeah, here we have it right here. You can see my cursor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you see here, it's, A, BR, A, X, A, S. And very often, sacred words, especially in Sanskrit, I think I pointed this out in a Secret Doctrine webinar last time. You often have an indication of sacredness, not always, but often, as a result of that interspersing of the A, which is, if you look at the Aum, the A is the highest principle, right? Represents the deity, or that, and there's other teachings from DK that talk about A representing the highest form. After all, it's the alpha, which is the initiating impulse, right, from one point of view. So, but other than that, it would be a fascinating thing to try to understand. The only thing beyond that is that B very often represents the feminine principle, as in Binos, and see, what's the third principle in the tree of life? That Bina, right? Binah. So since this is a creator God, then it would hold that you would have the deity in the first working through the B of the feminine principle. Beyond that, I've seen no specific breakout of these letters. It'd be interesting. I also didn't look at their numerical values. It'd be, if somebody wants to do that, and then just break in and let us know. You can do it in the chat box, and just, the letter values added up. Would be interesting to know that, just to see if it's significant. You just, you try all thing. But what's
Francis,
important, yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just
No, that's
wanted
all
to
right.
say that, he talks about the word abraxas as being 7 letters, but in reality it isn't, because that A is repeated. But if you look at that right there on the 3rd line, the abraxa, I can't even say it, the abraxas io, that is in fact 7 letters then.
Oh, interesting. 1,
So I
2,
don't
3,
know what value
4.
that adds, but there are 7 letters when you do it that way.
Hey, that was a good find, BL. That's really cool. So it works both ways, right? Because the A changes as you move. Think of numbers like you have, if you have, say, 7 numbers in a row, well, the first number is going to represent the millions column, right? And the last number is going to be the ones column. You have something similar going on here. I would, my intuition tells me is that this first A here that I'm pointing to would be absolute deity, which informs the creator God working through the B. And then you have these lesser instances of the spirit aspect informing each of the following letters. So they're different, right? However, it's, that's a really good
And
observation
and
about the 7.
Scott did your math for you. He says that oops, I just muted him again. Anyway, if you want to talk, Scott, you're on self-mute. But
In a mute battle.
what he said was HPB says it adds to 365.
Oh yeah, well that's in Greek. It does. Yeah, I was looking at it in English, but yes, in fact, that's going to be a point that we come up on here in a moment. How all of these great creator gods represented that 365-degree cycle, and this is not just the year, but it also has something to do with the precession of the equinoxes. But that's coming. But yeah, that's right, Scott. It does indeed. There's a chart coming up that shows that. Important here is the identicality of Mithra, Jehovah, and Abraxas. They're all solar gods. They're 3rd logos type creator gods. You can add a whole list of names to that, including, if you've been with the Secret Doctrine webinars, Oiaohu the Younger is also one of those creator gods, right? As well as Prajapati, and well, eventually, and we'll be getting to this later, Serapis, Mithras, Belenus in the Druid tradition. The interconnectedness of all these ancient disciplines is remarkable, really. So let's see, and what else do we want to pull out? Yeah, here they're related. He relates the 7ness to the root races. 5 extant, 2 hidden, which is a common thing. And then the fact that there's the 1 and the 7, right? And the 1 is the illimitable, the Ein Sof. And then there's the creator God that comes forth out of that. That's the 1 and the 3. The 3rd logos, 1st logos and 3rd logos, right? And then Valentinus, who is a Gnostic, he was sort of the last great Gnostic, and HPB had a special reverence for him. Brings up another one here, Arhetos, right? Hatos to me sounds very much like Helos, or a sun reference, also a solar reference, or the ineffable, Okay. Hebdomad means sevenfold. Right, and then Rhea is a another instance where you have first, think of again, going back to the name Abraxas. First a monad, that's the A, then a duad, that's the B, and then the heptad, which is the entire thing. And you often have that 1, 2, 1, 2, 7 kind of a thing. So we know a little more than we did. But
Francis,
it's still quite mysterious. Yes.
isn't Rhea the wife of Saturn as the head of the Titans
Let's see.
in Greek mythology? And also, Malia says that abracadabra is singing to her as this discussion continues, with all
Well,
those A's that you were talking about.
Look at that. Look at that. Yeah. Abra is already here, right? And then, so it's certainly related. It's not Disney did not make up the word abracadabra. It's an old form. So interesting. Yeah. No, somebody look that up. Would you look up who the goddess Rhea was, and we can get an answer on that. I think you may be
she is
about that.
Older sister and the wife of Kronos. In early tradition, she is known as the mother of the gods, and therefore strong association with Gaia.
Okay. So Saturn himself is, the ultimate creator god. His original number is 7, right? Very much associated with EAO in ancient times. And the rings around Saturn are seen as the ring paths not of time itself, of space and time itself, right? And that's one of the reasons that, in DK speak, it's a synthetic planet, right? It's the first synthesizing planet, so again, there you have, the 3, the 7 become the 3 before they become the 2 and the 1. So anything else on this? I'm glad to hear this much discussion. HPB can be intimidating, but okay. Next up is, I'm going to reread this because I have some good references to it. Samson Arnold Mackey advances the theory that the name is compounded from 2 ancient words, abir, which means a bull, and axis, which means the pole. To substantiate his belief, he brings forward the fact that a motion of the earth, commonly called the alternation of the poles, resulted in the vernal equinox taking place at one time in Taurus, the celestial bull over the North Pole. Okay, let's take a look at the actual quote from Mackey's fabulous mythological astronomy. If you're a nerd type, there's some wonderful stuff in this. 1827, this was written. So if we could get a reader for this excerpt from Mythological Astronomy.
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. The labyrinth has been described by various authors who agree in stating that it was a building full of intricate windings and turnings, containing between 3,000 and 4,000 little chambers.
I'm going to interrupt you, Joe, just enough to say that this is an Egyptian discovery found under the sands of Egypt. Go on.
They likewise agree in stating that the chambers were in rows facing inwards to winding alleys, which went round the building, ascending and winding from the surface of the earth, forming a spiral line from the middle upwards, and descending and winding, forming a spiral line from the middle downwards, which is precisely the figure described by the north and south pole of the earth, in passing from the ecliptic till they coincide with the north and south pole of the heavens, describing at once the precession of the equinoxes and the diminution of the angle of the poles. Who can here mistake the design of this hitherto mysterious building? Other nations have registered the rounds made by the equinoctial points and have given us the same number, each in a way peculiar to itself. But none have imitated nature with so much simplicity as the people of Egypt. But the historians inform us that there were 3 spiral alleys and 3 tier of little chambers, which shew that the pole had repeated its ascent and descent 3 times, and we find the symbol of the sun, that is the hawk, is placed 3 times upon the top of Cleopatra's needle, and we find the bull there as often, as if the bull had been as often at the pole. The gems called abraxes prove that the bull had been at the pole, for its name means the bull at the pole. It is a compound of abir, the bull, and axis, the pole. Mythological Astronomy 32.
So, I just, it's such a fascinating quote that I couldn't not quote it in full, compared to just this part of MPH's reference to it. So, it's just an amazing quote, isn't it? What he's saying here basically is that there is an underground labyrinth that extends 3-dimensionally up and downwards that represents the equinoctial movement of the precession of the equinoxes, right? And that at one point that Taurus stood at the North Pole, and that this is why Abraxas has this name. It's kind of an amazing thing, and the book is full of this kind of wonderful stuff. So let's see, moving on. First of all, any thoughts or questions about this? Okay. The importance of this past equinoctial event, when the precession of the equinoxes placed Taurus over the pole, the bull of the pole, may be the true esoteric reason behind the Mithraic Taurectony. Taurectony just means bull slayer. Could it be that this axis, found in almost every bull slayer image, represents the Earth's axis at this time? HPB makes the numerical connection between Abraxas and Mithras. In fact, the names Mithras, Abraxas, and the Greek name for Horus all add to 365, as does the Druids' Belenus. Do you remember, sometime back that we also looked at this chart, and you can see it there in the center of that little chart to the right, as Belenus, right? And I haven't run across this Oracle on the far right in any of my readings, but evidently it's another solar creator god. Okay, more than anything else, this really ties them to being one identity, right? Okay, we'll analyze the image of Abraxas when it appears on literally hundreds of gemstones a bit later, the actual analysis of the image.
Francis?
Yeah.
Sorry. You have a question from Martha. She says, is the labyrinth the source of the Christian labyrinth? And also, I'm going to put in the chat box a link where I found where you can get the PDF of that mythological astronomy.
Oh, great. Terrific. Thanks for that. Yeah. Well, first of all, the labyrinth far predates Christianity, and my guess, there's a master named the Master Scarlet who oversaw the building of the Chartres labyrinths in the Chartres Cathedral, and exactly in 1200 AD. So it was an extraordinary thing. And at the center of that labyrinth was the Minotaur, right? Apollo slaying the Minotaur, which is a distinctly non-Christian symbol. So it was recognized nonetheless as being, see, in early Christian times, you didn't have this enmity between all pagan beliefs and Christianity. And so at that time, they recognized it as being a legitimate indication of the path to Christ, right? So in that sense, yes, these early labyrinths were adopted by Christianity, but they were never, they never originated through any kind of Christian doctrine specifically. Okay, let's see.
And we also have a couple more comments. And Veronica adds about Rhea that she was a child of the Titan, a daughter of Uranus and Gaia, who is Earth, and she accepted sacrifices from newly married women and pregnant women. Their fourth child was Adis, the god of the underworld. Rhea defined is the flow of things as the queen of the oldest deity in Greek mythology. Rhea equals the flowing one.
Oh, that's interesting, which is very much connected with water, and which is the fundamental principle of feminine principle. You have fire and you have water. That's the first duality, right? So that makes perfect sense. Yeah. You know, in a sense, all these solar deities that we've been discussing, Abraxas in particular, are gods of the underworld, because we are the underworld. You know, we're not talking about hell here. We're talking about the lower quaternary, right? Physical reality. So particularly when we get to Serapis, you'll see the connections with Yama, who is god of the underworld in Hindu beliefs. You know, they're basically identical. But and so the fact of the creation of the lower realms, you know, what the Gnostics call the lower eons, the feminine eons, is being Lord of the underworld, right? And you'll see that more and more as we go along.
Okay, and then we got a hand up, but Malia says, interesting, the rooster head on the image of Abraxas.
Yes, heralding the dawn. So, you know, it looks to the east. This is this image is a pantheos. You know, it's unlikely that in deep meditation you're going to see this image, because it's in a sense a symbol or metaphor for these various aspects, right? And we'll get into that. But yeah, the rooster heralding the dawn, at least that's one representation. You know, the bird realm is also seen as in a sense, the first of realms. Is very connected with the Davic kingdom. So it's in a sense the first animal realm. So yeah. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, Trudy's got her hand up. You're self-muted, Trudy. You want to? Trudy, I'm not hearing you. You're self-muted.
Just click your microphone, Trudy, and it'll go green. It'll go from red to green.
Well, her hand is down now, so okay, all right. And then we have Anne Veronica says the four horses remind me of Helios, the sun, and his chariot of four horses that he rode in the sky every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's certainly part of the symbolism, right? You know, who was it that flew too close to the sun? You know, in this chariot, it was the Greek god. Just slipped my mind.
Was it Icarus or?
Icarus, good one.
Icarus.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you know, he was in the same chariot, but you know, he didn't have snakes for legs, so he didn't make it. You know, his wax melted. A kind of pretender. It's fascinating myth. In a way, we're all Icarus until we're not. Okay.
And then Scott says, the rooster answers the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Neither. The rooster, the creator, father.
Oh, perfect. Gee, Scott, you've answered the age-long question right here in this webinar. We should mark the moment. Yeah.
And
Okay.
W. Ellis, he says, Sol Invictus.
Do you want to say a little more about that?
Let me unmute him. Okay, you're self-muted. If you'd like to unmute yourself, can you talk?
You don't have to, but if you'd like
There we
to
go.
make a comment.
Well, it's because Mithras was actually, the father of Mithras was Sol Invictus.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that plugs it right in. Thank you for that. Okay, what is the root? I'm trying to get my head wrapped around Invictus. What is that? What is that? What's the root meaning of Invictus? Maybe somebody could you look that up, Michael, Stacy?
Invictus means unconquerable. So it was unconquerable sun.
Oh, so it's going to be like ineffable, unconquerable. All the attributes connected with the ineffable one, right? Okay, yeah, good. So it's the soul, meaning the ultimate source of fire, you could say, would be one way of describing that. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So to get us up to speed with the text, let's reread this paragraph on Simon and his Gnostic teachings. Could we get a reader, please?
Scott, can you read that for me? You're self-muted. There you go. There you go.
There you
Good.
go.
Okay. That Simon was a philosopher, there is no doubt, for wherever his exact words are preserved, his synthetic and transcending thoughts are beautifully expressed. The principles of Gnosticism are well described in the following verbatim statement by him, supposed to have been preserved by Hippolytus. Quote, "To you, therefore, I say what I say, and write what I write. And the writing is this. Of the universal eons, periods, planes, or cycles of creative and created life in substance and space, celestial creatures, there are two shoots, without beginning or end, springing from one root, which is the power invisible, inapprehensible silence, bithios. Of these shoots, one is manifested from above, which is the great power, the universal mind, ordering all things, male. And the other is manifested from below, the great thought, female, producing all things. Hence, pairing with each other, they unite and manifest the middle distance, incomprehensible air, without beginning or end. In this is the Father who sustains all things and nourishes those things which have a beginning and end. By this, we are to understand that manifestation is the result of a positive and negative principle, one acting upon the other, and it takes place in the middle plane, or point of equilibrium, called the pleroma. This pleroma is a peculiar substance produced out of the blending of the spiritual and material eons.
Thanks, Scott. So if this is not enough to convince you that we're looking at a deeply profound, esoteric doctrine with, a lot of relation to theosophical beliefs. Well, that's actually the end of my thought, even though that was a phrase. Yeah, it's a potent, and the more I looked into it, the more respect I gained for this. So let's take a look at the illustration that appears on the first page of this chapter, entitled "The Death of Simon the Magician." You may remember from last time that this is certainly a story made up to discredit Simon Magus, mostly by the Catholic Church, who was coming into dominance at that time. So, so the illustration is here on the left, and as it occurs on the page, and here's the close-up. And here's some detail. I'll just read it. It's so short. The death of Simon the Magician. Simon Magus, having called upon the spirits of the air, is here shown being picked up by the demons. St. Peter demands that the evil genii release their hold upon the magician. The demons are forced to comply, and Simon and Magus is killed by the fall. It's a complete fiction, but you can see how much fun the illustrator had. And, I mean, there's some really great stuff here. Here's the demon's head upside down, holding on to Simon, right, in their fall. So, as MPH says, it was made up from whole cloth. So, and I think the only reason that MPH included this is because of this great illustration. Just help make his wonderful book look even more wonderful. Okay, so back to the paragraph. Yeah, which indicates MPH realized that this was not a true statement about Simon Magus. So,
Francis, Malia says it looks like the worst of the mosquito black fly season in the north.
Oh, is that right? Well,
and I think there may be some truth to that too, because they say that the bugs that bother us, are the bad thoughts and whatnot, right?
Oh, I don't know that teaching. It sounds right, yeah, there's something fly-like in these creatures here. Interesting. Okay, so let's briefly correlate MPH's quote of Simon's teachings with this chart, which we looked at extensively in our last webinar, but we won't go through it in that kind of detail. We're just gonna, as a form of review, we'll use this. First, we have fire, the summit of all manifested creation, called by Simon the universal principle. The circle within the point just below, Simon called the infinite potency born from the concealed potentiality. So there's an important distinction there. The highest is concealed potentiality, right? The universal principle. And then you have infinite potency. Okay. That's Theosophy's first logos, what the SD calls the rootless root of, quote, all that was, is, or ever shall be. Just below the first logos is the realm of the Dhyani Chohans. This is what we've been talking about all morning. Abraxas, the 7-in-1, Jehovah, Mithras. This is that realm. Just below the first logos, this 1 and 7 is described by Simon as he who has stood, stands, and will stand. a singularity. A product of the higher eons, this is the first manifested singularity. Who is the third logos? Abraxas, Mithras, Belanus, Brahma, Prajapati, Oya Ohu the younger, as well as the seraphim Sephir, the highest of the seraphim, from which is to issue forth, out of all from this list, the sons of flame and fire, and through them all the lesser eons. Then we have the pleroma, that middle space, right? And the pairs of syzygies created by the two shoots, the masculine great power and the feminine great thought. This pairing is shown by the top triangle in the circle called the middle distance, where divine ideation becomes active creation through mind, voice, and reason. Great system. So with that brief review, let's move on to the next paragraph. Now we're starting in new material. Okay, can we get a reader? Actually, the end of this paragraph.
Lynn, can you read that for us? You're self-muted. There you go.
Yes. Out of the pleroma was individualized the Demigorgus, the immortal, mortal to whom we are responsible for our physical existence and the suffering we must go through in connection with it. In the Gnostic system, three pairs of opposites called syzygies emanated from the Eternal One. These with himself make the total of 7. The 6, 3 pairs, aeons, living divine principles, were described by some in the Philosophia Minna in the following manner. The first 2 were mind, nous, and thought, epinoia. Then came voice, phone, and its opposite name, onoma. And lastly, reason, logismos, and reflection, ephemesis. From these primordial 6, united with the eternal flame, came forth the aeons, angels, who formed the lower worlds through the direction of the Demiurgus. How this first Gnosticism of Simon Magus and Menander, his disciple, was amplified and frequently distorted by later adherents to the cult must now be considered.
Okay, first of all, it's as the final word in one of the U.S. spelling bees. The final word was the word syzygy, S-Y-Z-Y-G-Y, and that's how they won. That's U.S. spelling bee, but that doesn't get us much further in understanding what they actually are. Any thoughts or questions about this reading? Here are the 3 Gnostic syzygies, which are just duals or pairs, right? They're complementary male-female pairs, right? So we have 3 pairs with fire as the synthesizing agency, out of which they come. MPH describes these pairs as a, quote, positive and negative principle, one acting upon the other. So let's see, we have the masculine on the left, feminine on the right, mind or heaven, which is nu in Greek. I think I have a Greek with us, so I better not fake it. Is it nous or nu? I'm not sure. In French, it's nu. Anyway,
No.
you can
Nous.
nous. Oh, so okay, thank you. So it is nous with the S. So you can see the parallel, right? Mind, which is the abstraction, and thought, which is the specific within mind, which is has the quality of water and is called epinoia. Then we have voice. Interestingly, voice is usually representative of a feminine principle. But here in this particular set of syzygies, it's in the masculine place as the sun. But what do we have here? We have the logos, right? Of course, we have logismos below that, but I think that's different than the logos. The voice or the sun, phone, is that right? And good. Is that right? How do you pronounce the Greek?
Phony.
Phony. I should just have you pronounce these. So you have, so I would put this voice in the position of the logos, right? And then you have the name, which is, again, the specificity. You can see the sun moon quality there. Onoma, is that right?
Onoma.
Onoma. Okay. And then we have reason, logismos.
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 Logismos, yes.
Boy, we're so lucky to have you with us. And then reflection, earth. And could you say that?
Enthemesis. Enthemesis.
Enthemesis. Okay.
Yes, to remember something.
Ah, right. So it's connected with memory. So you have reason or logic, which DK equates with the Buddhic plane, right? And which is the plane of air. And then you have memory, reflection of that. You can see the pair. I'm glad you said that, memory, because that makes it clear. That pair makes that pair clear to me. Okay. I'm just catching up with me. Here we go.
May I
The
say
inverted.
something? May I say something?
Yeah,
The only Greek word that I don't understand is this epinia. I think it's epino, to create something, to create a thought. I'm not sure about that word. I can't understand it as epinia in Greek.
Oh, okay. And what's the word to create a thought? What's your word to create a thought?
To create a thought, yes.
Say the word.
Epinoisi. Epinoisi. Epi is above, noisy is nous, mind, to create something from your mind. That's thought.
Yeah, well, you know, this is, you know, it's almost 100 years old, so it could be, it could have just been there's a number of words in the MPH that are different. So that could just be
it could be ancient and me not knowing it. Yes, that could be too.
Yeah, maybe. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then Martha asks, does Bithos, silence, correspond with fire?
No. Bithos is corresponds with Mula Prakriti, if you've been in this secret doctrine group, which is the highest form of, you could call it the causal levels of the form aspect, but not it in and of itself form. So you could say it's the realm of time and space. And then so you have the masculine fiery impulse, which manifests as fohat in the arena or environment of Bithos. This is very equivalent to the Bina in the Tree of Life, which is the ultimate feminine principle. Okay. So the inverted B is the Pythagorean lambdoma, often used to illustrate pairs of opposites and their synthesizing agency.
Yes, what did you ask?
Yes.
Lambda.
Oh, thank you. Say it again.
Lambda.
Lambda.
Lambda. L.
Oh, lambda.
Lambda. That is the word L.
Oh, okay. Oh, you mean the letter L is lambda?
The letter L is lambda, yes.
Oh, gotcha. And this is the figure for the letter L, lambda.
Yes,
Oh,
that's the figure
yeah.
for the letter L.
I see. Okay. Sometimes I'm slow on the uptake. Gotcha.
And I can't remember well, but I think that words that had to do with L, and I have to search that, have to do with light. Behind this word, it means light, but I'm not sure about it. I have to search it.
Well, you have lux, you know, in the Latin, so it could very well be the root of that. So, okay, so you have alpha, omega, and then you have lambda. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's used in this way probably because of its shape, you know, which allows for this kind of use of the letter. But there may be something more to that. I'm not sure. Okay. So there is at this point an interesting synchronicity with stanza 4 in the Secret Doctrine series for the demiurgus, the quote, immortal mortal, are the primordial 7 from stanza 4, verse 2, right? This list I just gave you, which, you know, includes Abraxas and the Prajapati and Mithras. They all belong to this level of being. And in verse 3 of this stanza, we have the creation of the Gnostic pleroma, or middle distance. So let's follow MPH's instruction and take a further look at what HPB has to say about the demiurgos. Could we get a reader, please?
I'll go ahead and read it and hope there aren't any terrible words. Bohat is closely related to the one life. From the unknown one, the infinite totality, the manifested one, or the periodical manvantaric deity emanates. Okay, the periodical manvantaric deity emanates. And this is the universal mind, which, separated from its foundation source, is the demiurgos, or the creative logos of the Western Kabbalist, and the four-faced Brahma of the Hindu religion. In its totality, viewed from the standpoint of manifested divine thought, in the esoteric doctrine, it represents the hosts of the higher creative Dion Chohans.
Okay, so I'm going to reread this sentence. Oops, let me go back. From the unknown one, the infinite totality, the manifested one, or the periodical manvantaric deity emanates. And this is the universal mind. Okay. And what he's saying here is that Fohat is the agency of this form of emanation. And emanationism, by the way, is very central to the Gnostic belief system. And it's universal mind, right? Which, when separated from its fountain source, which is the one life, right, becomes the demiurgos, or creative logos of the Western Kabbalists. Okay. And that's represented in Hinduism by the four-faced Brahma. I mean, how can you resist an image like this, right? And why is it the 4 in 1 instead of the 7 in 1? Well, if you remember, stanza 3, verse 7 says, and the 4 took to itself 3, right? So the 3 in this case is the lower 3, right? So this would be the highest levels of the creative realm, the 4 in 1, who takes to itself the 3, which then becomes the septenary, right? Okay.
And Veronica asks, does demiurgos mean demigod?
Yeah. Well, you know, the ergos is literally like, it's the impulsive function that we see, for instance, in Aries, right? The ergos being that which moves forth, that which emanates. So it would be, and of course, demia is like a demigod. So I would say the ultimate ergos is the you know, for instance, Abraxas. It's the one who then, through the 7, who are then the demi-ergos, manifest the manifested universe, right? Create the manifested universe. So there's always this quality of the 1 and the 7, right? And this intermediate stage is the 4, right? Which is the highest realm of creative activity.
And then Maria asks, what does the bird have to do with Fohat? Is that the 1?
Well, it's the Hamsa, which is the it's you could say space, time and space. So together, it's a point of location, which is manifestation. You could say it's the very highest representation of, or I should say the most causal representation of the manifested realm, right? And the metaphor is that it floats on water, and water being the actual created universe, is, you know, and so it's the source of that, but on the feminine aspect. So the masculine creator god floating on the on this bird that is the substantive realms in potential, you could say. Now, I might have been able to say that better, but that's what came. So Fohat, which you may remember hardens the atoms, which includes the Gnostic eons. You could see a whole eon because it's informed always, these Gnostic eons, by some being at the center. It's like the point in the center of the circle. So from one point of view, these are the atoms, right? And so Fohat forms these atoms, right? And thus emanates universal mind in the pleroma, or middle distance, under the direction of the 7 and 1 demiurgos. Remember stanza 3, verse 7, the 1 is 4, and 4 takes to itself 3, and the union produces the sapta. Well, here we have in the four-faced Brahma the 1 who is 4. By the way, I suspect that it is from this quote in the SD that de Perucker got the name for his book, Fountain Source of Occultism, since this quote is the only place in the term appears, the term fountain source appears in the SD. It's sort of an aside. I think that's where he got the name for his book. We read from de Perucker's Fountain Source. We read from de Perucker's Fountain Source last month. This quote from the same source describes the lower eons. So let's, if we could get a reader for this, please.
Okay. Yvonne, I'm going to unmute you, and I want you to read this, but I also want you to ask your question about the personality, okay? Okay, there you go.
Okay, that 4 and 1, that I was wondering if that was like the personality.
Yeah, no, this would be
the lower 4, yeah.
It's not the quaternary. It would be more akin to the cosmic etheric realms, the very highest subplanes, or I should say planes of the cosmic plane, right? So it would be at that level that this particular God would exist. It's interesting with the four. You have either the four below with the three above, right? Which is the lower quaternary and the higher trinity, or you have it reversed, which is the four etheric planes at whatever level, and then the three manifest planes. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and if you would read, that'd be great.
Yes. Thus we find in the system of Simon Magus that the first 6 aeons, synthesized by the 7th, the parent potency, passed into action and emanated in their turn 6 secondary aeons, which were synthesized by their respective parent. Simon's third world, with its third series of 6 aeons, and the 7th, the parent, is emanated in the same way. It is the same note which runs through every Gnostic system. Gradual development downward into matter by similitude. And it is a law which is to be traced down to primordial occultism or magic. With the Gnostics, as with us, this 7th potency, synthesizing all, is the spirit brooding over the dark waters of undifferentiated space, Narayana, or Vishnu in India, the Holy Ghost in Christianity. But while in the latter the conception is conditioned and dwarfed by limitations necessitating faith and grace, Eastern philosophy shows it's pervading every atom, conscious or unconscious.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this? So the 7th potency here is counting from the bottom up, of course, because it's a great synthesizing agent. And Narayana, described here, appears in the 2nd stanza of this secret doctrine, which is the darkness that breathes over the waters of space, right? In India, that force is Vishnu, which is, you remember that figure reclining on the 7-headed serpent, right? And then out of its navel comes Brahma, who is the creator God again, right? But Vishnu, Narayana, is the inimitable, the unmanifest. Okay, so any thoughts or questions about this? So again, for the many of you who also attend the Secret Doctrine series, during our last SD webinar, we analyzed the number 14, which is derived by adding 3 plus 1 plus 4 plus 1 plus 5, which is pi, as well as the number 21, which can be gained by adding 10 plus 6 plus 5. The Secret Doctrine suggests that these numbers represent the 2nd and 3rd waves of the Gnostic eons, which is why I'm bringing it up here. So it'd be the 2nd, which is the one above this, and the 3rd waves, right? So the 14 characterizes this, the higher 7 and the lower 7, right? And then this is that 3rd wave, which is taken forward by the 21, the 14 to 21. Okay. So could we get a reader for this passage from the Secret Doctrine, Volume 2? He
Gary,
talks about this.
Gary,
Go
can
ahead.
you read that for us, please? There you go.
Okay. 5. It's the same group. Shall I read the beginning? We've had that already.
Yeah, I don't think you need to. Go ahead just
No.
with that. It's just as a form of reflection. Go ahead.
Compare with these pairs of opposites. In the Anugita, the pairs of aeons in the elaborate system of Valentinus, the most learned and profound master of Gnosis. As the pairs of opposites, male and female, are all derived from akasa, undeveloped and developed, differentiated and undifferentiated, or self or prajapati, so are the Valentinian pairs of male and female aeons shown to emanate from Vithos, the pre-existing eternal depth, and in their secondary emanation from Ampsiu Uran, or sempiternal depth and silence, the second logos. In the esoteric emanation, there are 7 chief pairs of opposites. And so also in the Valentinian system, there were 14, or twice 7. Epiphanius, copying incorrectly, copied 1 pair twice over, Mr. C.W. King thinks, and thus adds 1 pair to the proper 15, the Gnostics, etc. Here King falls into the opposite error. The pairs of aeons are not 15, a blind, but 14, as the first aeon is that from which the others emanate, depth and silence being the first and only emanation from Bythos. As Hippolytus shows, the aeons of Valentinus are confessedly the 6 radicals of Simon Magus, with the 7th fire at their head. And these are mind, intelligence, voice, name, reason, and thought, subordinate to fire, the higher self, or precisely the 7 winds, or the 7 priests of Anugita.
Thank you, Carrie. So, any thoughts or questions about this? The main point being that the synthesizing one is not itself a separate eon, but it is the one from which the 14 emanate. This is just the same as the 1 and 7. It's just that there's an inner and outer pair for each of the 7, right? The Egyptians were really big on this. And it's one of the stanzas too. 7 inside and 7 outside. It states, right? So again, you have basically here the 7 and 1, but not 7 and 1 or 14 and 1, you know, but the 7 in 1. You have the same thing happening with the subplanes of any of the planes, right? You have from the first subplane the 7, but it's also the synthesizing one. It's not 8, right? Okay, so back to the text, and we'll go on. Could we get a reader, please?
Lorraine, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yes.
There you go.
The school of Gnosticism was divided into 2 major parts, commonly called the Syrian cult and the Alexandrian cult. These schools agreed in essentials, but the latter division was more inclined to be pantheistic, while the former was dualistic. While the Syrian cult was largely Simonian, the Alexandrian school was the outgrowth of the philosophical deductions of a clever Egyptian Christian, Basilides by name, who claimed to have received his instructions from the Apostle Matthew. Like Simon Magus, he was an emanationist with Neoplatonic inclinations. In fact, the entire Gnostic mystery is based upon the hypothesis of emanations as being the logical connection between the irreconcilable opposites, absolute spirit and absolute substance, which the Gnostics believed to have been coexistent in eternity. Some assert that Basilides was the true founder of Gnosticism. There's much evidence to the effect that Simon Magus laid down its fundamental principles in the preceding century.
Thank you. Well read. Thoughts or questions about this? Since MPH wrote this passage, scholars now dispute the claims that Basilides' school was based on pantheism. The Alexandrian Basilides or Basilides, who knows, wrote over 24 books entitled, it's a set titled the Exegetica, which were Gnostic commentaries on the Gospels. And of course, that's not necessarily the Gospels that are included in the New Testament, all of which were destroyed or lost, except for a few fragments. Here's one of those fragments. But he was quoted by the ancients, and in this way, as in the case of the Druids, if you remember, all the surviving information about the Druids came through quotes from the ancient writers, right? So some of his teachings survive. For example, we have this quote from Clement of Alexandria, quoting Basilides. Quote, "We assume that one part of the so-called will of God is to love all. A second is to desire nothing. And a third is to hate nothing. But by far the most enduring influence from Basilides comes to us through Carl Jung, who, using Basilides' 7 sermons to the dead as the basis of his famous Liber Novus, better known as the Red Book. Note the circumscribed equal arm cross, symbol of the third logos, which appears in Jung's paintings throughout the Red Book. It is the defining symbol in the Red Book, right? And if you remember from, I think it was our last webinar, a merchant was able to buy one of the codex, one of codices, which he then presented to Carl Jung as a birthday present. Can you believe it? It eventually made its way back to Egypt and the Department of Antiquities there. So he was very involved in the teachings of that time, and of Gnosticism in particular, right? So I'd like to take a look at the opening lines of the first sermon from Basilides. I've chosen to present this passage at some length because it gives further insight into the Gnostic pleroma. So if we could get a brave reader for this longish passage, that'd be great.
Martha, are you a brave reader? There you go. Thank you.
The first sermon. The dead came back from Jerusalem, where they did not find what they were seeking. They asked admittance to me and demanded to be taught by me, and thus I taught them. Hear ye, I begin with nothing. Nothing is the same as fullness. In the endless state, fullness is the same as emptiness. The nothing is both empty and full. One may just as well state some other thing about the nothing, namely that it is white, or that it is black, or that it exists, or that it exists not. That which is endless and eternal has no qualities, because it has all qualities. The nothing, or fullness, is called by us the pleroma. In it, thinking and being cease, because the eternal is without qualities. In it, there is no one, for if anyone were, he would be differentiated from the pleroma and would possess qualities which would distinguish him from the pleroma. In the pleroma, there is nothing and everything. It is not profitable to think about the pleroma, for to do that would mean one's dissolution.
Watch out.
The created world is not in the pleroma, but in itself. The pleroma is the beginning and the end of the created world. The pleroma penetrates the created world, and as the sunlight penetrates the air everywhere. Although the pleroma penetrates it completely, the created world has no part of it, just as an utterly transparent body does not become either dark or light in color as the result of the passage of light through it. We ourselves, however, are the pleroma. So it is that the pleroma is present within us. Even in the smallest point, the pleroma is present without any bounds, eternally and completely. For small and great are the qualities which are alien to the pleroma. The pleroma is the nothingness which is everywhere complete and without end. It is because of this that I speak of the created world as a portion of the pleroma, but only in an allegorical sense. For the pleroma is not divided into portions, for it is nothingness. We also are the total pleroma, for figuratively, the pleroma is an exceedingly small, hypothetical, even non-existent point within us. And also, it is the limitless firmament of the cosmos about us. Why, however, do we discourse about the pleroma if it is the all and also the nothing? I speak of it in order to begin somewhere, and also to remove from you the delusion that somewhere within or without there is something absolutely firm and definite. All things which are called definite and solid are but relative, for only that which is subject to change appears definite and solid. Wow.
Thank you, Martha. So, any thoughts or questions about this? The pleroma is the nothingness which is everywhere complete and without end. Yeah.
Francis?
Yeah.
Anne Veronica has said that Michael Robbins in his Identify as Being would love this. So
wouldn't he though?
Yeah, I've passed that on to Michael Stacy, who supports Michael in his Identify as Being series.
Yeah, indeed. He would love this. It sounds like Michael wrote it, you know. It is both the point and the, you know, the, where does it say? The pleroma is an exceedingly small, hypothetical, even non-existent point within us, and is also the limitless firmament of the cosmos about us, right? So, you know, in this we see the, but this is not, the pleroma is not before manifestation. It's not the absolute. Don't mistake it for that. Remember, it's the middle space. It's the place where pure spirit, in the form of the first logos, and the substantive realm, you know, the upper shoot and the lower shoot meet. But it does not. It is not in and of itself that which is created within it or that emerged from it. It's the causal state of being before that creation. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions about this? Okay.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Martha says, yet the light that passes through us is intangible, and that upon which all of what we are depends.
Yes. Let me think about that in relation to this. All right. It's intangible in the same way that this is. It's interesting. That's it was a metaphor that a light passing through a perfectly clear object does not take on anything from that light that passes through it, and it was equating that to the pleroma. It just is another way of pointing out its absolute causal relationship to phenomenality, right? What he calls, where he talks about, you know, that which is solid is inherently limited, right? Yeah, all things definite, solid are but relative to this. But in turn, the pleroma itself is relative to the absolute, which is pure beingness. And, you know, really, if Michael was here, we would never get off this page. It would be the rest of the webinar, right? Because this is this is his briar patch. Okay.
All right, we've got a couple more comments, but I just wanted to say that I put the two most recent links for Michael's Identify as Being. He just completed series 3, and he's just started series 4. So I put those links in there to everybody if you want to look at them there on Makara. Okay, now Malia says, could it be called an absolute paradox?
Well, first of all, you have to have a pair in order to have a paradox, right? You have to have an enigma. What was it? Enigma wrapped in a paradox, something like that, is born from pairs of opposites, right? Creating an irresolvable conflict, unresolvable conflict. This is more causal than that, except in the sense that you have the ultimate feminine creative shoot, and the pure spirit meeting at this place. But the meeting as yet has produced nothing. In a sense, it is the ultimate pair of opposites, but there's been nothing created that could create a paradox, you could say, right? At least that's my take on it. You know, somebody else might have another understanding of paradox.
Okay, we have lots more comments, but I just wanted to tell you, I Googled it. It was a Winston Churchill quotation. It is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma.
Thank you. No paradox there, but, you know, similar idea.
Right, okay. Maria says, is this 7 sermons of Carl Jung in the Red Book?
Yes, it is. Take a look if you have it. And I don't know if the Red Book is available in PDF or not. I didn't, well, this much of it was, because I pulled this out of offline. So yeah, I'm a little hazy on that. But yes, the sermons are available. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, Jeremy says, wow, so beautiful. The ageless wisdom in manifestation.
Yes, indeed. Right. This is the most causal interface between the two great, between the essence of the fire, which is the source of all that creates, not the creative impulse itself, but the source of that, and the arena or the environment, time and space wherein that can occur. Okay, anyone else?
I
won't go off this page.
Oh.
I put an online link in the chat box, gnosis.org library, for this particular 7 sermons to the dead.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Michael. So as a side note, Basilides, who taught in Alexandria from 117 to 138 AD, was most certainly well acquainted with the great library at Alexandria, which was at its height during his lifetime. In fact, given his stature as a teacher and philosopher, he may well have taught in the library, and very possibly his books were housed there. By the way, these illustrations are completely conjectural, especially the one on the right there. Nobody knows what the library looked like, but we can assume it was a grand structure.
That reminds me of the Acropolis.
Yeah, it has that look, doesn't it? Certainly does. But this was in Egypt, but completely Greek influenced.
Right.
So you have here, down here you have the Egyptian influence, and then up here you have the Greek. It's just somebody's idea. This is very Egyptian. Yeah. So next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yes. Mary, can you read that for us? I'm getting a very bad echo. I'm sorry. Let me go on to somebody else, okay? Linda, can you read that for us? You're self-muted, so you need to unmute yourself. Okay, I guess not. All right, let me read it.
There you go.
The Alexandrian Basilides inculcated Egyptian Hermeticism, Oriental occultism, Chaldean astrology, and Persian philosophy in his followers, and in his doctrines sought to unite the schools of early Christianity with the ancient pagan mysteries. To him is attributed the formulation of that peculiar concept of the deity which carries the name of Abraxas. In discussing the original meaning of this word, Godfrey Higgins, in his Celtic Druids, has demonstrated that the numerological powers of the letters forming the word Abraxas, when added together, result in the sum of 365. The same author also notes that the name of Mithras, when treated in a similar manner, has the same numerical value.
Okay, so we've looked at that. And again, here's the pair of charts we looked at a few moments ago. This is from the Celtic Druids, cited by MPH. As mentioned before, all these deities are solar gods whose various names add using the Greek alphabet to 365. It shows the importance and prevalence of the Greek alphabet in those times. Notice also that the sum 3 plus 6 plus 5 adds to 14, identifying all these logi as creator gods, which by definition belong to the Gnostic second wave, that middle space, that wave of the middle space. So let's finish the paragraph. Can we get a reader?
Scott?
Okay. Basilides taught that the powers of the universe were divided into 365 eons, or spiritual cycles, and that the sum of all of these together was the Supreme Father. And to him he gave the Kabbalistical appellation Abraxas, as being symbolical, numerologically, of his divine powers, attributes, and emanations. Abraxas is usually symbolized as a composite creature, with the body of a human being and the head of a rooster, with each of his legs ending in a serpent. C.W. King, in his Gnostics and Their Remains, gives the following concise description: the Gnostic philosophy of Basilides, quoting from the writings of the early Christian bishop and martyr, St. Irenaeus. Quote, he asserted that God, the uncreated eternal Father, had first brought forth nous, or mind, this the Logos word, this again phronesis, intelligence, and from phronesis sprung Sophia, wisdom, and the dynamis, strength, unquote.
Thanks, Scott. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? Here's an illustration of the involutional descent described in this last sentence. We have abraxas, mind, nous, word, logos, intelligence, phronesis, then wisdom, Sophia, and finally strength, dynamis.
And Veronica asks, why is 365 important?
Well, it's a number, as I just mentioned, it adds to 14. It's a number that it's there's so much about 365. Of course, it's a complete solar cycle, so it represents the diversity of manifestation, and also, since it describes a circle, well, really as 360 degrees, and that's an interesting side note. The unity of that, for instance, the Egyptians recognized the 360 as separate, completely separate from the 5, which were holidays in ancient Egypt. So they had 360 normal days, and then they had the 5 holidays that were solar holidays, right? Also inherent in that is you have the 6 and the 5, which you also have that in the 1065, right? Well, 10 is a container number, and so is 3, right? 3 is the first container number. You have 3, then 7, then 10 as the container numbers, meaning that they hold and express the energies that make them up, right? So you have 1065, which adds to 21, and here you have 365, which adds to 14. So it's the more, there you have the 14 is the solar creative number, right? The 7 and 1 inside and outside, 7 inside, 7 outside, right? So those are a few ideas around that. Anybody else have thoughts on it? Scott, how about you? Do you have any thoughts on 365?
Not at the moment.
Okay, that's fine. So let's see here.
And Veronica says 365 days in a year.
Well, of course, yeah,
And
that's
then
so you have the solar cycle, and then you have the degrees of a circle, and they're very much related, is the point, right? But it's interesting when you compare the 3 and the 6, which gives you 9, which is the fullness of manifestation, which is what 360 degrees in a circle give you, compared to the 3, 6, and 5, which give you 14, which is much more in this creative aspect of the solar creative deity. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. No, I interrupted you. Miss Alice says logos also means rational thought. Mithras equals 360 degrees of the zodiac. Logos also means the word of rational thought.
Yeah, if you go back to the syzygies, you see here the word, right? And don't you feel like it's like you're walking around the outside of the temple where the true mysteries, are housed. And of course, to get into that temple, you have to be able to access higher mind and the intuition, because this is where that's the source of all these teachings. And but it's it's what we have in the written word, and it all points inward, right? I'm still just blown away by that passage in what was it, mythological astronomy, which describes this labyrinth that details in its construction, the precession of the equinoxes, you know, pointing to Taurus over the it's as being over the North Pole, you know, and the Druids also revered that time. That's the Maypole was the same idea, you know, the axial pole that, you know, and then you had that May 1st festival, right, which is in Taurus, of course. Okay, let's see. Where
And
is
then
the camera?
Malia says in England they often speak of people not having any nous, which in context seemed to me to indicate common sense, as in he didn't have the nous to come in out of the rain.
That's great. I love it. Right. Well, I think that's stepped down a little bit. You know, maybe the better term would be, yes, no phronesis, right? But we'd have to go to Anne Veronica to get an opinion on that. There's a, you know, you could meditate on this involutional descent, right? Strength dynamis, of course, represents a kind of lower quaternary kind of space, right? And then you have wisdom. Sophia is often associated with lower mind. At least it's in Gnosticism, she is, or it is, right? Intelligence has a higher form. See, normally these are, you would think of these as reversed, but intelligence brackets the entire mental process. And DK sometimes uses it that way too. It brackets, you know, all those aspects that go into this principle that is called mind, right? And then you have this emanation, this very phohatic emanation of universal mind, right? Which comes through the word. And that's at these, well, actually that would be at this level, universal mind, nous, right? And then that would, the feminine form of mind, if you remember, in Syzygies was, the word was no, it was thought, wasn't it? I'm getting myself in hot water. This was the masculine phone or phony, something like that. Below mind, right? And its opposite was name. Mind's opposite was thought. Anyway, it's an interesting meditation here. Okay, let's see what we have next. Okay, this is the Theosophical Glossary's entry on Abraxas, whose images appear here on the left, and give us more insight into this. Could we get another intrepid reader to step forward here?
Malia, will you be our intrepid reader here? You're self-muted.
All right, I'm feeling very intrepid.
Oh, good.
Abraxas, Gnostic, mystical term used by the Gnostics to indicate the supreme entity of our cosmic hierarchy or its manifestation in a human being, which they called the Christos. Abraxas has the value of 365, based on numerical equivalents of the Greek alphabet. Because 365 represents the cycle of one revolution of our planet around the sun, they held that in Abraxas were mystically contained the full number of families of entities composing a hierarchy. Excuse me. These entities received from their supreme illuminator, Abraxas, the streams of life and inspiration governing their existence. Thus, in a sense, Abraxas is the cosmic oversoul, the creative or third logos, Brahma. The Basilidian Gnostics taught that from this supreme God was created nous, or mind. Abraxas was also identified with the Hebrew Adonai, the Egyptian Horus, and the Hindu Prajapati. Gnostic amulets known as Abraxas gems depicted the god as a pantheos, all god, with the head of a cock, the herald of the sun, representing foresight and vigilance, a human body clothed in armor, suggestive of guardian power, legs in the form of sacred asps. In his right hand is a scourge, emblem of authority. On his left arm, a shield, emblazoned with the word of power. This pantheos is invariably inscribed with his proper name, Iao, and his epithets Abraxas and Sabaoth, and often accompanied with invocations such as Semes Ileum, the eternal sun, the Gnostics and their remains, 246, which Blavatsky equates with the central spiritual sun of the Kabbalists. Though written in Greek characters, the words Semes Ileum, Abrasax, are probably Semitic in origin. Shemesh, sun, Olam, secret, occult, hid, eternity, world. Abrasax, Abraxas. Hence, in combination, the phrase may be rendered the eternal sun, Abrasax.
Thank you. Well done. Thoughts or questions about this Theosophical Glossary entrance? Anyone? So it's interesting, the idea of the central spiritual sun, which is the unified source of our outer sun, right? The one before the seven emerge to create the outer realm, in this case, our local solar system. Let's see what else in here.
Scott is here.
Yeah, Scott.
Oh, I don't mean to interrupt you there. I was looking in the Source of Measures by J. Ralston Skinner, since he does so much with numbers. And one of the things he points out with 365 and 355, he likens it to looking at the Ouroboros, that circle, serpent swallowing its tail, and that serpent having 365 units to it. And the question then becomes, how many of those units are in his mouth? And if there is one, which is what you would expect, you'd have 364, which are seen, and that's 7 times 72.
It's also becomes 13, if you subtract 1, which is what 355 add to.
And that's he says 354 is a lunar number for the number of days in a lunar cycle.
355, you mean? 355 or 354?
354. Same idea of subtracting 1 from it, but that's on another number.
Gotcha. And it also gives you the cosmic 12 with that. Interesting. Yeah, I'd like to read that in context. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, check it out in Source of Measures. Look up 365 in the index.
Will do. Yeah.
And sorry. And Veronica asks, does IAO mean I am the Alpha and Omega?
Well, I don't know about the I, because what is I in Greek? Like the personal I in Greek, and Veronica?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
That's the reason that I'm asking, because I saw the A and the Omega.
Right.
The I, it's just an alphabet. How do you call it?
Letter. But what I'm asking you is, what when you refer to yourself, like in English we say I am, what is that in Greek? What is that I?
Εγώ είμαι. Εγώ είμαι. It might mean something like that, but I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking. The I am you say, we say it εγώ, I, είμαι. I am being, I exist.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think that's a good interpretation. This is also a name for Saturn, which is the be-all, end-all in manifestation. Again, the 7 and 1. I am the Alpha and Omega. Well, as soon as you're into the realm of Alpha Omega, you're in manifestation. If there's a beginning and an end, you're not talking about the absolute, right? You can't even say I am in reference to the absolute. It's kind of like what we were looking at in this description of the pleroma. Nothing you can say about it, and you could say nothing about it. You can say everything about it because both are true. Because it is both emptiness and the opposite of emptiness, which is the absolute fullness of everything. Well, there's Alpha and Omega, and so in this case, if I like that. I like that idea. I can't absolutely substantiate it, but it would be, I think, a statement that certainly would be attributable to Abraxas, because that's exactly what it is. You could even to the point that the two serpents, could represent that Alpha Omega quality. It's actually a good observation. Thanks for that.
And Miss Ellis adds that ego is Latin for I.
The ego is Latin for I. You mean I is Latin for the ego?
You're self-muted. You're self-muted there if you want to unmute yourself and explain.
No, ego is I in Latin.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. Yeah. Yeah, the ego is I in Latin. So there you go. So if you go to, but you're combining Latin and Greek, still, I'm easy to convince. I think it's a.
And Veronica says, and for Greek.
Oh, is that right? The I is ego in Greek? I mean, I and ego are interchangeable in Greek.
No. Ego, ego means me, I.
Okay.
The whole problem is that the I in English means me.
Right.
I am. Ego, when we say the ego, it's a Greek word and it means me.
Okay. So let me just ask you, Aunt Veronica, this, in your estimation, does this IAO, could it represent in holding within just the Greek, could it represent I am the Alpha and Omega?
Well, it gives me that feeling.
Okay.
I am the Alpha and Omega. It gave me this feeling. That's why I asked for it. Maybe you knew something more.
Right. No, I don't, because I don't know the Greek well enough to know. Certainly the sentiment works. I mean, the idea works. This being could make that proclamation. But trying to make it all Greek, it looks like we're adding apples and oranges here, one orange and two apples. But yes. There you have it. Okay, we're done, folks. That's going to have to do it for today. I really enjoyed this webinar and your input. Some great stuff came out. And we're just getting into this Gnostic study. So when's our next first Sunday? That's going to be it's going to be in August, isn't it?
Yeah, but then we have a problem. So the first Sunday is the full moon webinar. So our next STOA is 9 August.
Is that a Sunday?
It is a Sunday.
Oh, I see. So August 1st is a Sunday.
August 2nd is a Sunday.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. And then +7 equals 9.
There
Yeah.
you go. There you go. So
Wow.
that's our
See,
next.
I'm really good at this
So
stuff.
that's our our next STOA, and of course we have to put in a plug for the next secret doctrine, which is the 19th. And for those of you who care to partake, we have
It's the
our
19th. So is that going to be the 4th Sunday then, huh? As opposed to the 3rd. So
no,
they,
it's the third Sunday in July, the 19th.
oh, yes. Sorry.
2
Okay.
weeks away from today. And
Right.
for those of you who care to join us, Eva and I have our Leo Aquarius, the pairs of opposites webinar on the 11th. So I just
Yeah, and
had
that's
to
going to be a,
throw a plug in
that's,
for that.
yeah, I'm glad you did. That's a really fundamental pair. Yeah.
And
I've
for
kind
those
of
of you who want to
in on that.
know, at the end of each series, we show a couple of charts. And our two charts for Leo Aquarius, surprisingly, are Donald Trump and Barack Obama.
Wow. Well, I'm not sure if that is if that's a good reason to go or not, but
It
at least
is
one of them is.
a poster child for how not to do the axis and a poster child for how to do the axis.
Yeah, very interesting. That sounds fascinating.
I'm sorry, was
Okay,
that a little too political?
not at all. Since you mentioned both parties, how could we fault you? So 19th will be the next webinar on the secret doctrine, just 2 weeks. And then following that, there's going to be a skip of 3 weeks to take us to the 9th of August for the next Secret Teachings webinar. So until then, thank you all for participating, and I'll see you then. Take care.